and welcome to another episode of the Rolewise podcast, your show where we talk about things related to role playing. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that was kind of inspired by the fact that in one of our um, other tables, I'm not really sure what to call the difference
Our
between
home game.
our home game. That's the right. Our home game. We're actually going to be exploring Dragonbane. And Dragonbane, according to many, has at least features or components of it that are OSR. And honestly, an old OSR, for maybe those of you that aren't aware of the term, is old school Renaissance or old school revival. I think it's possibly two terms. Um, and it certain has a certain culture, certain mentality, and certain vibe about how the games are played. And honestly, having played so many more modern role playing games over the last while, I'm not sure I fully even remember or understand what OSR was. So I thought we'd do a little research, do a little discussion, and see if we can understand at least the premise of OSR enough that we can enjoy our Dragonbane game to the fullest. How does that sound, guys?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right, perfect. Now, if we were really cool, I'd edit in a cool scene that would be like, okay, now this is the start of the podcast. But we don't have that, so we're just going to keep going.
Here, Star Wave. There you go.
Boom. Okay, so so OSR, so old school Renaissance and everything like that. I mean, I hear that term thrown around a lot, and obviously if people go around and they have their corner of the internet, there's subreddits dedicated to OSR style games. OSR games have either existed in the form of games that are specifically designed to imitate the feel of OSR, or they could come in the fact that there are D&D retro clones that exist also that are very much a lively way to play games that either have been modernized and use language that makes sense in today's world, kind of clean up the rules to make them better, or they could be really honest to the original game and try to use it with some of the flaws and everything like that it has, according to my understanding. But according to what you guys are understanding of OSR and what it means, what would you say would be like if you were speaking to the uninitiated? How would you describe an OSR game to them?
In my opinion, and I'm going to say that because I don't want anybody to yell at me, I feel like OSR games are more like a puzzle where the player is interacting with the dungeon or environment versus a new school role playing game, which is more about the character and the story of the character.
Okay, I can see that. Jeff, what about you, based on your impression of what an OSR game is?
I'm probably the three of us the least familiar with OSR. I mean, the only OSR game that I've purchased books for was Shadow Dark. But my general understanding is that it's about rulings and not rules. So you should have a smaller rule set. It's about the player's skill and not the character's abilities. So it's kind of the knowledge that the player brings to the game, and the things that they describe and that they do, and not like, well, my character isn't trained in this, so I can't roll for that. They're supposed to feel heroic, but not like superheroes. I mean, I hear that a lot when I read about OSR stuff, especially on Reddit, that like modern role playing, it feels like you're trying to create superheroes, and I sort of get that. And that there isn't forget game balance. There's a lot of difficulty and a lot of challenge and a surprising amount of lethality in an OSR system if you just blindly go around opening doors and drinking from pools and eating food that you don't know the source of and things like that.
It definitely doesn't protect the character at all. So because it doesn't protect the character at all, it really doesn't encourage you to have a very complicated. I don't think it encourages you to have a very complicated character. Like for those of you who watched earlier episodes, we just rolled up characters for Distal recently. Like those background pieces that we did for Distal are not part, like that is as far from OSR as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I don't think this applies to every OSR game, but a lot of them are using like old school rules, like rolling like 3d6 straight down your things, like in the original Dungeons and Dragons. So you can't actually go, I want to play a wizard, because you might roll a 3 in intelligence. Like you kind of have to roll your things and then decide what you're going to play. Because I don't know, like if I remember back to those first games of D&D, and it's been a long time, that I played, when we tried to do that. I mean, we were kids, so we eventually stopped, just rolling straight, because we were kids. There was a power fantasy that wasn't fulfilled by having every stat under 8.
Well, you have a character you want to play, and
you have a character you want to play, but like it very much felt like we were just, kind of local kids that were like, we're bored and we want to go on adventures, and we grab pitchforks and rakes and rocks and a backpack, and went off and either promptly died or got maimed.
Yeah, you're more in OSR, you're more likely to play Frodo, who doesn't know anything, than you are to play like Aragorn, who is the hero. If you look at Lord of the Rings, Frodo is the character that really gets carried along by more capable people, and you're more like that than you are like Aragorn. You might have a sword, but you're not really like super good at it.
Yeah, you're not playing the superhero type guy. You're playing the
you're not playing the hero at all. You're playing, well, I mean, you
could be.
You are playing a hero in that you are a person that goes out and does things like explore a dangerous dungeon, which that's a heroic action, but you're not super capable. You're more like a normal person. You're not super
you're more like the stable boy that got pressed into the army and then somehow, filled the breach, and stopped the enemy from advancing, just out of sheer luck.
I think anyways. That's my impression.
I don't have a lot of experience about OSR stuff, so I'm kind of here to learn more. Like I said, Shadow Dark is we've played one game. I've read the books. There are things that interest me. There are also some things that don't. But I think there are times where I want something different out of a game than the people that are really hardcore OSR players.
Well, and I think you guys bring up interesting points. And what I would like to point out is, obviously we are not OSR experts. I think that's
in
the comments. If you want to jump in and say, look at these assholes, and then talking about OSR. If you have your own definition of OSR, or you carry with it, experience with OSR, let us know how it goes for you. Like, what attracts you to that style of game? Because it is a very interesting type of philosophy. Because I mean, I think that, and this is something that I don't think OSR has locked down aspects of gameplay that you can't achieve with newer or more modern styles of role-playing games. And I think that that's where you start to see some interesting bridges between OSR, new OSR, and modern style games. Is that, like a modern style game, Brad, I agree with you. I think that it very much focuses on the characters and the story, because your freedom to explore can be a little bit more toned down to the scope of the narrative. Whereas in an OSR game, you hear about things like hex crawls, and you hear about legendary tables that some OSR games and everything like that have introduced, is because they want an element of, how do I say it, an element of surprise and uniqueness for both parties involved. So as the judge, or the person adjudicating whatever OSR game that you're playing, you don't know all the answers, because you're not putting necessarily a forward thinking plot to it. You are basically weaving together the emergent gameplay that is coming through them naturally interacting with the world around them.
You may have a dungeon map that you designed, and then you have random tables when they enter the dungeon area, or some ideas like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so you can, it takes it has a very interesting approach in regards to some things like that. Because everyone talks about like how some games feel railroady, especially in like D&D and stuff like that. You're like, oh man, well, the only agency I had was to choose how I opened the door that got me to the goal. Whereas in an OSR game, technically you have the agency to do whatever you want, but whether or not what you do is right for the world, or right for the the problem in front of you, is a different story. but I think that when I look at OSR games and stuff like that, and I think about the lethality about it. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before, and it's like, well, you go to a mage's tower, you open the door, you die because you didn't knock first. You're like, I'm not sure what the lesson here was, like, because it's not like I just get to, re-roll a character. But I did read recently that they were like, well, if you have characters that tend to die frequently, and of course, they talk about how your resources are managed. I mean, goals for OSR games include acquiring property, acquiring lands and kingdoms, like building yourself up to be a noble knight or something like that, and having hirelings, squires, henchmen that basically become your pool of replacement characters, so that if you, the guy who hired them, are in the dungeon now instead of Sir Tristan the Brave, I am now Bob, his
Yeah, you send people to
luggage
do your
carrier.
dungeons for you. Yeah, you send people to do the dungeons for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think that
but I
those.
mean, that was part of hirelings and stuff, and henchmen were all part of like original D&D, like, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I remember that. I remember reading about it. I don't think we ever actually got to a high enough level where we were able to have those, but I remember there were rules, like especially for like martial classes, right? They because
Right.
you got martial, you got a claim, you attracted
Mhm.
followers.
But I don't think original D&D is as much OSR old school as people are talking.
Well,
Because
depends what
there
you mean
was
by original
because
D&D,
well no,
because that.
because there was like the original basic D&D did have those henchman levels and stuff like that, but like they expected you to role play and involve yourself in a kingdom, which a lot of the older games before that were you go to a dungeon and you're in the dungeon and that's the game.
Mhm.
And a lot of these
Sure.
games they try and work those other parts in, but really essentially what you're going to do is you're going to go conquer a dungeon. Like for example, Morkborg is or Merkborg or however you pronounce it,
Yeah.
is an OSR game. And basically the first adventure, the adventure that they kind of showcase the ability is you start at the front of a dungeon. They don't tell you why. They say a king told you to go to this dungeon and fix this problem.
Here you
And
are.
so yeah, there you are at the start of the dungeon. Who you are doesn't really matter. You're just in the dungeon, and then you go in the first. I think slight spoiler, but I don't really remember, so it's probably not. And then you go in the first room, and it's like a table and bookshelves and some skeletons, and that's it. And then you in the game is going through and going to each room, seeing if you can find what is in the room, loot, whatever, and then maybe solving the problem that the king told you about if you don't
Mm.
die in the process.
Well, so here's something that I find is interesting about OSR games that maybe I don't really like about modern games, but I do like about OSR is I like the characters engaging with the world a little bit more organically than dice rolls have you do it. And I the only reason it matters so much to me right now is because as I'm going through like the Age of Worms game and everything like that, basically that was check happy. I mean, there was a DC 0 check for you to notice something about a statue or something like that. Make a DC 0 check to notice the glyph that's staring you right in front of your face. And I'm like, what? A DC 5 check? Like these just become cumbersome rolls to make that don't really, I
They're
feel.
just there to have you roll dice.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just there to have you roll dice, and that also is bad. But
Mhm.
is it worse than okay? We go in the room. Okay, there's this dais in the center of the room. Okay, well we think that's important, so we go up to the dais. Well, what do? I push on everything, every part of the dais. I push on it until something happens, because that's
Well,
what OSR kind of expects you to do. Because you're not going to roll a spot hidden or search. You're just going to say, how do you interact with the statue? I push and pull on everything. Like what happens in games like this is like the missing ring finger, the missing ring finger in the most recent game that we found in a different
Yeah.
place. Okay, I replaced the ring. Okay, I put the ring into the slot where that's missing. What happens? Well, nothing. Okay, we turn it around and we put it in the other way. Okay, nothing happens. Okay, we put it in his nose. Okay, nothing happens. Like, I mean, that's I mean, and it sounds pedantic and stupid, but like when you're relying on the players to just make it like to try things, like you're going to have moments like that.
so
But oh, go ahead, Jeff.
no,
I
I
have
just
a I have a question.
Well, while we still might have some viewers, I just want to open this up to the people watching. And you guys. Well, we do. I mean, we have an idea of how long people watch our videos, right? And so I'm hoping to get some action in the comments here. And if you guys know of something, but is there a live play out there of like a really talented group playing an OSR game so I can see, not just your average Joes playing the way they like to play an OSR game? Like, that would be a great illustrative, like, if you watch this or listen to this will make you want to play an OSR game, because I'm interested. I mean, when you, in between episodes here, when we were recording, like I found a sheet online where there's over 300 OSR RPGs, that where people have grabbed stuff. This is not a small phenomenon. This is not a corner case. This is a lot of people playing a lot of games and having a ton of fun. And I feel like I'm missing out to a degree, and I want to learn more. So do you guys know of any actual plays or live plays that people do of OSR games? Does Morkborg do any?
Yeah, there's some Morkborg real plays out there.
Yeah,
I can see if I can find a good one.
Okay,
I
just,
personally
if I
don't
search on
know
YouTube,
any.
I'm afraid I'm going to get like 3 yahoos like us, playing again. Like, we have fun. I'm not saying they're not having fun, but I'm trying to get something that grabs me. Maybe not Critical Role level.
So here's the
professionalism.
here's the other part about the OSR movement that's kind of difficult, is no one really has a set definition of what it is. For example, one of the reasons that we're having this discussion is because, like Mike said, we're going to be playing Dragonbane in our home table, and like Dragonbane has way more skills than most OSR games. Like, if you compare it to Shadow Dark, like there's a lot more skills in it. You compare it to Morkborg, that doesn't really have skills. That has like your abilities and your stats, and like that's it. Like, these are the things that you do. Everything else is in your brain. So like there's a heart, like there's is it Dungeon Crawl? Is it Dungeon Crawl Classics with a peasant funnel?
Yeah,
Which one's
that's the one.
Like, there's Dungeon Crawl Classics, which has a peasant funnel, which readily says your characters aren't going to survive. You make 5 of them. Like, and that's considered OSR. So it's like there's a I feel like there is not a, I don't know, it's like when you talk about techno music, and like there's like 4 million subgenres of techno music, like dark wave, retro wave, vaporwave. Like, it's like that. Everybody kind of has an idea of what everything is, but it's not always the same. So if you look, like when you look at, and the other thing with OSR is it's so, I think this is one of the things that I think people want, is it's very personalized, because the person adjudicating the game is going to make decisions, and those decisions are going to be different than anyone else makes. And so that game is going to solely be your game. And I think that's I think that's the experience that maybe people are looking for.
Well, and I still bring it back to that emergent part just a little bit, because I think that, when you look at the style of games and everything, and you see what people get out of it, is that, like, to your point, when you say like, well, I just push on every part of the casket, it's my understanding that in an OSR game, you as the player should like examine your surroundings, and me as the DM or GM should provide you with an adequate decision to interest you in your surroundings more, so you can kind of clue into things. And I may have done that in the Age of Worms things, where I said, okay, well, as you examine around the sarcophagus, you notice that there are these, circular.
No, we rolled for it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that like that's the kind of thing that you would probably say is like, okay, as you examine the sarcophagus, you'd notice these types of things, and you go, oh, well, maybe there's something that I need to engage with here. Okay, well, I look to see if there's any levers or anything on the, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that part of the OSR game it's interesting because it engages with the world, and like I said before, that's something I'm very interested in. But to your point, there is a too far. Like, and I mean, there is I think there's literally a blog that's like the 10-foot pole, where your adventuring party just becomes a meme of people walking down a dungeon, like tapping every brick with a pole.
Well, no, in the document you sent us, that we read, the old school primer, like that's his example, is we pull out our 10-foot pole and we tap our way down the 10-foot hallway so we can find any traps. And like, that just seems so, I don't know, like it has to be a balance between mystery and discovery. Like, like for an OSR game, like if you would, so yeah, you could have just said, yeah, there's a dais up front and there's a circular pattern around it. oh, well, why not? Like at that point, you're almost just telling us,
Yeah.
turn the dice, and like that's not any more interesting than rolling a dice, really. And honestly, that game's going to start to feel more railroady than anything, because what's going to happen is you're going to walk in a room and they're going to be like, yeah, there's some gems on the wall. One of them looks like you can turn it. Like,
well, there may be a step before that. Oh, there's some gems on the wall. There's some stuff, and you make a room, and you go, okay, well, I go examine the gems, and because I'm going to steal them. That's my rogue character going to go. I'm going to pop them out. Oh, well, you notice one of the gems seems to be tethered to the wall. Like I mean, just because you were there to steal it doesn't mean you can't find something.
And then the trap kills you.
And then the trap kills you because you didn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. But I don't know, and I'm sounding really militant against OSR games. I don't. I'm not telling you you're doing your fun wrong if you want to play an OSR game. I'm just saying that it feels like sometimes people like to say OSR is the way you should play your game, and you can't do these things in modern games. And the fact is you can reward creativity in modern games. You just have to do it a little bit differently, and maybe and be just as clever. Like, if a party really wants to use a 10-foot pole moving down the dungeon, which I don't think any real party would do ever, you can do that. And maybe the GM gives you advantage on a roll if he wants to make you roll for it, or maybe he just tells you.
So I have a question, and I don't have an advanced doctorate in medieval trap design, okay?
Yeah.
But how hard are you slamming this pole in, and how big are the pressure plates? Like, if you got to tap like every 3 inches, right, across where you go, and you're slamming it down with, I don't know, 100 pounds of force to mimic a footfall, like,
well, your character's not that strong.
Like, well, I don't know that a footfall is 100 pounds of force. I'm pulling numbers out of thin air.
I'm just telling you.
I didn't almost say a body part.
I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. Your fighter that rolled his dice straight down the middle, and his strength 12 isn't hitting the floor.
Yeah, like wouldn't all of your torches burn out, and you be in the dark and out of food rations by the time you got down 50 feet a hallway? I mean, that's a lot of tapping. And then you totally missed all the secret doors. Like, I know I'm being sarcastic, but I really do want to learn more. There are things that I don't really miss about the way the rules for original Dungeons and Dragons were written. I did, but in fairness, I was a kid and we didn't fully play rules as written. We played rules as we liked, the ones we liked to use. You know what I mean? Because we didn't always have a DM. I literally played games where it was the characters doing it was more like playing a board game than a role-playing game.
Well, that is one thing I always want to stress, and I don't know if I've said it on any of our episodes yet, but there is no wrong way to play pretend with your friends, really.
Right.
Like, that's essentially what you're doing. Whatever rules you want to use to play pretend with your friends, that's fine.
Play the games you love. Have fun.
But sometimes, and I guess one of the reasons that OSR is hard for me is because I feel like I'm just playing myself when I play a lot of OSR games, because I am not a wizard, and I don't know. I'm not as smart potentially as a wizard. And so some of the decisions they make are best exemplified by having skills that I can roll with a bonus to say that oh yeah, you come up with an idea or something. Plus, as we've said before, player characters, people playing characters can be very dumb at times. So there is a time there, and this is the 100% me. I will say 100% me. I would die all the time in an OSR game because I would do something stupid.
Well, but is there something to be said that you learn through your deaths? So you evolve as a player the more characters you...
No, there's something to be... No, there is something to be said.
I don't think so, no. You saw how quickly my character in the most recent game was like, yep, I'll jump on that chain even though there's a dead body down there. Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is I think that there's a certain, like, what's interesting is I think you become more of a dungeoneer than you were. Like, each character death, you go, oh, okay, well, obviously we should bring the 10-foot pole and make sure to touch the side walls instead of just the pressure plates or the floor, because There was if anybody's looking, I did see at one point, I don't remember if I saw this at my local game store or something like that, but it's called Grim Tooth's Traps. Basically just a collection of how all these different traps could work and all that stuff.
Yeah, I have
But I feel
seen
like
them.
that's perfect for like an OSR style game because like those are the threats you're fighting against in addition to all the different dungeon monsters and everything like that. But here's a
Well, yeah,
question for you.
and I think that's another thing that people kind of want out of the game is they get tired of it always being like monsters or bad guys, and
Mhm.
so like people use traps, and that's perfect. But like again, that's not something you don't have to do that. You
But
can,
I remember, like, even in third 3.5, playing some like pre-canned, modules, adventures,
Mhm.
Mhm.
where some of them it felt like literally every room you went into had four separate traps or puzzles to solve. And I'm going to be honest, the puzzle solving, unless the puzzles are really well designed but approachable, like you can have a really well designed unapproachable puzzle that the players are never going to figure out.
never.
Never, ever, 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 ever.
Well,
And I
but
remember that getting a little old in some. I don't remember if it was something that our friend James ran us through once, or it was somebody. Maybe it was I'm conflating groups at this point.
Yeah, I don't think Jay. I
But
don't.
I remember playing. He doesn't usually do anything pre-canned, but
Well, and I don't know if old school. I don't know if he would. What do you think? Do you think he would play old school essentials? Would be his sort of thing?
mm, I think so. I mean, I feel like he likes. Well, I think he likes creativity in games, and I think that sometimes when you have a lot of rules and you got a lot of minutia, he can feel like I don't need that. I want to tell a cool story, but at the same time, I don't think that necessarily his type. I don't think he has as much fun with the game where it's just like you go into a dungeon, you go into a room, explore the room. That I don't think that's his style of game. His game is telling stories. So
okay. Yeah, it probably wasn't. I don't know why something's triggering in my brain. Like I said, things are probably conflating a little bit in my head.
yeah.
But
Well,
and I'm not saying I'm against these things. I'm also against, just literally like, all right, I already know that we're stronger than all of these monsters and that, it's weighted to win like 70-30 for us.
yeah.
And then I've got to just how many times do I got to roll the dice before all these, before I get to a real treasure. You know what I mean? Where it's just the mindless, brainless, effortless, imagineless combat.
Well, but I think that that's something that OSR also does pretty good is because there's a certain
Correct.
lethality to it. Is that
Sure.
you don't approach every like you don't approach a dungeon with the job of being monster
I'm gonna
exterminators.
right.
Right.
Like you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, unless that's the goal of the dungeon is to go in and like just kill every last furry creature on the inside. Um,
Well,
That's
every
not
time,
gonna that's not gonna be an adventure you win in an OSR game. Like OSR games aren't combat games. They
no,
definitely aren't combat
but basically the point about
usually.
it is more either a how do you twist it in your favor by using non-combat means like oh
sure,
well we set up a deadfall and these creatures get caught in a deadfall trap that we used, or b how do you avoid the combat entirely, just so you don't have to deal with it and maybe hopefully not deal with it later. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's kind of interesting because
Yeah.
I do feel that in fifth edition especially it's like you see monsters and most modules are like you see some monsters, go mess them up like
Well, I think this is a complaint about like fifth edition and where D&D has gone is your characters are they're not great at first level, but they are capable of killing a monster.
Mhm.
Um, so like some of that cleverness is really dumbed down. Like you just attack it as opposed to well, we draw the monster back and into the traps that we found, like
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And but like
You can
uh,
still do it in that game.
right,
You just
it's a
have to
mindset,
like change your mindset about it.
right.
And I think
You
that's
do.
which is
and
what I've always said is the problem with D&D. Is like it's a mindset of we just go up and punch it with our sword.
well,
And
but isn't that part of the like and that's why I think that the OSR mentality, at least based on my research, seems to be interesting to me. Is it because you look at your character sheet as like a backup plan for the conversation that you have with the DM. You don't go, okay, well, my character sheet only limits me to these 25 things or 10 things or six things or whatever it is. Whereas in
right.
D&D 5th edition, you kind of go, okay, well, have these skills. Obviously, these are the types of things that I do, and so you kind of use that as your crutch as you go through the
Yeah, but I think there's ways to encourage your players in other games, not just D&D, because this isn't just a place. I guess again, this is one of my get away from D&D sometimes comments, but like I guess that's the thing is there's ways to encourage even in those games. There's ways to encourage people to be clever as opposed to just being stat driven.
yeah,
Like if my players were one players have to be less durable. That is true because they have to be like I can't just straight up fight this thing.
I just
Which again, I'm one of those dumb people when I'm playing a D&D game. But like the GM, it also puts a lot of work. The OSR games also, unless you're randomly generating everything, it also puts a lot of work on a GM that wants to, or a DM or GM or whatever the hell you want to call it, who wants to tell a story because, like, he has to plan for that stuff, kind of. Like, he has to say, you meet this thing, and then you avoid the traps. Well, he has to know to put the traps there, like or whatever. Like he has to do things to encourage the party to be.
No, he has to know to put the
clever.
traps in the ceiling because the players are tapping the floor.
Well, I mean, and so
Well, then
so
there's that.
so as
There-
the game master, you're putting you're putting the obstacles out there, but it's interesting because your goal is to put the obstacles out there, put a couple solutions, or sometimes no solutions, and just have the players suggest to you a solution. I do feel like that part of OSR thing is like when you're like, what do you think the best solution to this trap I've devised is? And they're like,
well, and
it's
there
pretty
is an
good,
element,
actually.
and there is an element of competing with the GM.
Mhm.
Like
Little-
you're pitting your cleverness a little bit against the GM's cleverness. And what do we know about GMs? They can just win when they want to.
yeah, a little GM
Well,
fiat.
Like for example, the 10-foot pole, the example, and this is the example from the old school book that we looked at. Like the 10-foot pole, like if they say we're tapping every stone down the pathway, like I guess at that point you're just basically saying, okay, you find the traps or you don't find the traps. Like that's completely up to the GM
Mhm.
on rewarding them with that clever, whether or not it's clever. Which is kind of arbitrary in my opinion. Like I think most good GMs are going to be like, oh yeah, you find the pit traps, or you set off the pit traps, or you set off the spike traps or whatever. But you can find GMs that don't, that are just like, no, I went through a lot of work to design this trap, so it doesn't set it off. So
It knows to only be set off by people instead of poles.
yeah, it's magic. Heat
Yeah.
signatures.
Well, and I mean, I guess for me, the 10-foot pole thing doesn't really sound as exciting as a game to me.
No, sounds
Like,
it
I have to
sounds
manage.
terrible.
We went through a 60-foot dungeon. It took us 3 days. We ran out of rations. We had to go back to town.
Yeah.
And we
yeah,
found
but you
3
always
gold
had
pieces.
I mean, that was one thing, right? There was a lot of going back to town.
Yeah.
I remember in D&D, we would run out of food or not have torches because, not everybody was playing races that could see in the dark, right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't even exist in the first edition of the
Well,
rules.
yeah, in OSR games, that isn't a thing usually. Usually, you aren't.
Yeah, you got to have some sort of light sources.
Yeah, and I mean, and that was something that was a rule that I didn't necessarily enjoy about Shadow Dark when we played, was that like I didn't the torches, the rounds, the how you proceeded through the dungeon. I was like, it seemed like a type of gameplay that I wasn't really as interested in. However, I have watched some other creators who have been, sharing like their Shadow Dark prep and how they do their stuff. And I was like, oh, this sounds much more interesting to watch them get ready for their games and how their games could be because of how the kind of mentality and all that kind of stuff. And I think I'm just how you say like not everybody likes every type of game.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like our group may not fall very well on the OSR side of the fence.
Well, we may not. That's why I was asking about real plays. I did find a Reddit thread from 2 years ago that has looks like some really good suggestions. But one of the things is the more you play a style of game, the better you get at it. The more the players understand the rules and the GM understands the rules, and the player GM or the player adventure interactions become smoother. And none of us have a huge background in OSR games. That's why I was asking for some suggestions, because I'm open. Like I said, I backed the Shadow Dark campaign. The books are probably over in the bookcase, or maybe outside in the hallway in the bookcase.
They're under the desk and holding up that short leg.
No, I wouldn't do that to Shadow Dark.
I don't know. OSR will always be sort of a hard sell for me because I am very character driven. Like my character matters. Like I don't want them to die just meaninglessly walking, sweeping, just going through a doorway and they just fall into a pit trap that I wasn't clever enough to say, oh, I swing the door open and look inside first. My character, I'm more narrative driven. I'm more of a person where the character matters, and I want the story to be more oriented around the character than the dungeon that we're
Well, is it any OSR? Because you do have Morkborg on the shelf behind you somewhere, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if I would run a Morkborg. I feel like I would
run it. You don't.
I would run it.
Okay.
I would play in it, but the thing is I would never expect that character
that's fair.
to go past that one shot. Like I feel like OSR games are one shots, and I know a lot of people talk about the game that they've been playing for 40 years or whatever, but I feel like if they have characters, a game that's lasted that long, they've taken out some of the OSR stuff and implemented more modern character-driven role playing.
Or maybe this is just their 40th character, and
or that,
yeah. That's another reason why I kind of want to see somebody that is super into it, that has a cohesive table, GM who's used to running that kind of stuff. I just want to see what the experience is like. And the funny thing is, for those of you watching, is I'm not the real play watching guy. I'm the guy that's like, I tried to watch that real play and I couldn't get through. It was 4 hours and I couldn't get through 50 minutes of it because my mind started to wander. But I am interested. I want to learn more about some of these games because they come up all the time.
Well, and I am the actual play podcast / YouTube guy, and like one of the things that keeps me listening to podcasts are how people play their characters, and that's why, and again, I think that's why one of the reasons that OSR is hard for me is because like I don't feel like I don't connect with the character, so really I don't give a shit if they die. And if I don't give a shit if they die, I'm just going to do stupid shit all the time. Like when we played that peasant funnel, I was basically shooting peasants at traps like they were out of a gun. It was like, yeah, I run into the door head first and break it open. Like because they don't matter, to me at all. Like I have no connection to them.
You're walking into all the buildings and licking all the windows.
Yeah, they're like
search the garbage for food. Is there any food in there that could get me
that happened? I think that happened in that game. I went through the garbage. He said, yeah, there's garbage and there's this like dark substance in it. And I think I said, okay, I reach in to see what's in the garbage because he described it, right? So it was interesting. So my character got pulled into the garbage can by a black ooze. Like I think that happened. Like I'm pretty sure that actually happened.
Okay. I think now I need to play Dungeon Crawl Classics on the stream just to see if it's
like just shoot them at the obstacles like bullets because they don't matter.
So I guess what we'll do is we'll find out how this goes with Shadow Dark, and if not Shadow Dark, but Dragonbane, and if it honestly, again, we're not opposed to any type of game or anything like that. We will try many types of games, and we've had a lot of success with a lot of different games. We played Pathfinder, we played D&D, we played all these free league games. I mean, our list of games that we played and enjoyed over the last couple of years has been amazingly long by comparison to what we've done beforehand. So
it's surprising to me the number of hits. Like on some level, like I have liked most of the games, and there's only been one or two where I was like, I'm kind of okay not playing that again. Like it's like this. It's not like 50-50. It's way more successes. So there are a lot of great things out there, which is why I'm so open to trying to learn more about OSR and doing this without buying $1,000 worth of books.
I'm not going to comment on $1,000 worth of books. I will be interested to see how much Shadowbane straddles the line between OSR and a normal
Shadowbane. Is that your personal Dragonbane, Shadow Dark,
Dragonbane, whatever?
Brent's gonna
it's late, guys.
Give me a Kickstarter.
Give me a break. I'm sure there's a Shadowbane game out there.
There probably is.
But Dragonbane, how it straddles the line between OSR and more recent games. The funny part being is like our party is usually the party that avoids combat, like every time they can. Like very rarely do we role play like head first into carnage.
No, unless somebody challenges one of our party's honor, then
Yeah.
we have a
Are you kidding?
Jump
Our
in.
player characters tries to get a surprise attack every time there's an opportunity for combat. He's like, I ain't taking no chances.
Well, and that's the character that didn't choose, and he didn't choose any combat. Stuff.
No, he built a character with no combat skills.
Yeah, I'm the only one.
Surprise around.
Yeah, I'm the one that have the combat skills in this game, and I'm gonna be like, nope, I'm not fighting that. So we'll see what. Well, no, I can't be like that. Well, see, that's the other thing is that our characters have more quirks than an OSR character has. Like my character has that. I don't know. He has to kill all the monsters.
Has to kill all the monsters. Oh, that's right, because you're like,
yeah,
your weakness is basically like
all monsters are evil, and I have to slay them. So never mind on the avoiding combat this time.
Yeah, like let's be smart about this. You're like, ah.
It doesn't say I have to be dumb. It just says I have to kill them.
That's true. But you could still. Like, have a battle
I mean, it's me, so they probably will be dumb, but they don't have to be.
That's true. That's true. So, okay. Well, then I think what I would say is that we're willing to give any game a try. Obviously, I think that there are certain components of the OSR style of games which maybe more freeing but also less freeing. I hate to quote Bluey here since I've been watching so much of it, but rules do make games fun. Having a fair, concise, consistent set of rules, you can have a lot of fun with that, just as though you can have a lot of fun with being really creative around your table too. As Brent likes to say, there's no real wrong way to play pretend, right, Brent?
Right.
So
yeah. Playing pretend with your friends is the goal. It's not really the goal isn't to do anything more than that.
Yeah, so however you enjoy that, that's fine. We just want to see if we can understand the allure of these types of games, which people have been enjoying the heck out of for so very long. So, again, if you have any of your favorite OSR experiences, what type of game were you playing? What game were you playing? What type of campaign or adventure was your character on, or a series of adventures? What made it so much more fun than a modern style game? Let us know in the comments. We really would be curious to hear what made that go so well. And then, of course, after I kill these guys in a couple weeks on Dragonbane, we can talk about our own OSR experience and see if that matches up to anybody else's.
And if I know one thing that's consistent between games, modern games, traditional games, new wave games, old school games, it's Mike's potential to kill us is very high.
I never needed to play an OSR game to be a lethal.
Exactly.
But I don't feel like I'm the instigator. It's not me who charged the hell pig, Brent.
I didn't die that game.
That's true. He didn't die that game.
Yeah, no one died that game, for the record. No one died that game. What you can say is I was the one that made the halfling berserker, which was a mistake. You can say that.
I can. So, Jeff, if they want to reach us outside of YouTube, where would they go?
Yeah, if you want to tell us all about your OSR experiences or just the name of the best OSR game out there, you can find us by searching @Rolewise on Facebook, Threads, Twitter, or YouTube. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And since I've made all the OSR people hate me already, I hope you enjoyed hanging out with us tonight. And I hope you come back to hate on me more, I guess. But as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
What's the version of ratioed on YouTube?
I think isn't it ratioed, just ratioed?
We will find out. See you next time. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.